Hello, my name is Catherine Harafis, and I am an occupational therapist specializing in young stroke survivor rehabilitation. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about the return to work goal. Instead of specifically looking at one aspect of vocational rehabilitation, I'm going to give a more holistic look at young stroke survivors' return to work process. And hopefully this will be beneficial to you all. Now let's first take a look in general to work. Is it good for us? Of course it is. It provides structure to daily life. It is a key factor associated with one's personal identity and role in society. It affords independence and financial security and provides opportunities to meet psychological, emotional, and social needs. There is a strong association between worklessness and poor health, and some of the factors that have been identified as a higher mortality. Higher mortality, poor general health, poor mental health, regarding psychological distress, anxiety, depression, higher medical consultation, higher medication consumption, and higher hospital admission rates, and decreased self-efficacy. Now, for specifically the sick and the disabled, work is a phenomenal activity. It can be therapeutic. It can reverse the adverse health effects of unemployment or long-term absence, the ones discussed earlier, physical, mental, and social adverse effects. And it reduces poverty and social exclusion. Overall, the beneficial effects of work outweigh the risks of work. They're greater than the harmful effects of long-term unemployment or prolonged sickness absence. And overall, work is good for health and well-being. Now, young stroke survivors, there is most definitely a trend of stroke onset occurring at a younger age. So we really must be very focus our research and our work in helping these young stroke survivors return to work. Because there's 45% of stroke survivors are under the age of 65, and under the age of 55, stroke survivors constitute basically 20 to 25% of all strokes in the UK, US, and Australia. And there are many various return to work rates, however, but they can be as low even as 7% in some research. And even more important is that sustaining work is not easy. And there hasn't been a lot of research, more recent research in respect to stroke survivors. However, there are some statistics in Australian brain injury statistics involving 32% of stroke survivors who are no longer working at 5-year follow-up, even though they were working 2 years post their injury. Now, there are a lot of factors, there's a great importance in regards to returning to work. Okay, now returning to work for these stroke survivors obviously provides financial stability and independence. It contributes to life satisfaction, well-being, self-efficacy, self-worth, and social identity. And instead of feeling disempowered by their injury and by society and even their family members, work can really help to empower these individuals and feel like productive members of society and whole again. Opportunities for social interaction and networking, and of course, work helps reduce the social stigma of stroke, again, seeing them as functional members of society, and not one just to cash in on disability benefits, because again, returning to work, of course, alleviates a significant societal cost for not returning to work. There are many sequelae of stroke that may influence returning to work. Some of the more visible difficulties are the walking mobility issues, visual issues they might have, visual field cuts, speech, aphasia. It really limits their communication abilities and expressive abilities, and of course the functional use of affected limbs, and specifically of the hand. However, there's a whole range of invisible cognitive challenges which really probably have been found to affect the return to work rate and sustainability more than the visible difficulties. And these are executive functioning issues, like difficulties planning and organizing, attention and concentration is decreased, processing speed is slowed down, memory may also be affected, and literacy. And even though some of those sequelae are associated with damage to specific areas of the brain, most obvious, distinct of the speech difficulties associated with left side brain damage and right side hemiparesis, the actual anatomic location of the stroke is not as important compared to the functional status in predicting return to work. So it really hasn't found to be correlated, which is very interesting. However, fatigue is a major issue, especially in sustaining work and employment. And researchers have determined that as many as 80% of stroke survivors experience fatigue. And then you can imagine how fatigue will permeate all post-stroke challenges. So it's something that must be considered as one of the major issues. And of course, there's psychological, emotional challenges, depression, and emotional liability, mood disturbances associated with a stroke. Now, there are also societal and professional issues and factors. The societal stigma, of course, is one, and the lack of awareness of and knowledge of stroke, which, of course, will limit the community and the workplace's acceptance of these stroke survivors, and this inflexibility that often is seen to implement necessary adaptations in order to ensure that these stroke survivors can return to work. And policies and benefits are really not known to the stroke survivors, as their knowledge of existing vocational supports and benefits and services is lacking, and there's also lacking of individual rehabilitation and focusing on return to work. There are obviously transportation challenges. If they have lost their driver's license, they may not be able to manipulate the public transport system, and the poor local economy, specifically here in Greece. There are very few job opportunities for able-bodied individuals with no neurological issues, and you can imagine it's a much harder struggle for the stroke survivors. In general, vocational rehabilitation is a process whereby those disadvantaged by illness or disability can be enabled to access, maintain, or return to employment or other useful occupations. And specifically now, with return to work for the stroke survivors, some want to return to work as soon as possible for fear of losing their jobs, financial difficulties, and research also says that it should be an early on goal. However, rapid return to work may be premature, and the hidden impacts of the stroke may not surface till they're back at work, and specifically fatigue and cognitive difficulties discussed earlier. So physically returning to work is not the only important thing to consider. It's only the first step. And performance on the job and job retention are major factors and major goals. So Bissiker and Milanchip, amongst many researchers that are focused on the fact that there should be different stages in regards to vocational rehabilitation and returning to work for these stroke survivors. Starting the vocational route is one, pursuing the vocational routes, and then finally sustaining employment. Specifically with starting on the vocational route, this is where you begin to discuss and formulate the work-related goals. Along with the rehabilitation professional, the client establishes the needs in relation to work and develop an action plan. Acquiring basic skills, work simplification and energy conservation education, confidence building, all these are important. Self-awareness and insight development is crucial, and many self-assessments are given to stroke survivors in regards to returning to work, and we want to increase their insight and their awareness in regards to their limitations and strategies and needs. Anger management, social skill development, and advice in regarding to accessing benefits and transportation as an issue, of course, rehabilitation in general to address physical restrictions and limitations. In pursuing vocational routes, there's two aspects to this. If the client returns to the existing job, obviously then the intervention focuses on job and workplace evaluations, employer education regarding the stroke survivors' needs, strategies, etc., and continued rehabilitation, obviously, for the stroke survivor to improve required work-related skills. Now, if they don't return to existing job and they choose to retrain, and the intervention focuses on identifying suitable training courses and arrange and provide appropriate learning support. The training provider of the training courses must be educated as same regards as the employer up on top. And there should be a regular review with all involved to ensure progression in these training courses. And of course, in preparation for working, of course, we have CV writing, interview skills, behavioral management issues. All these need to be addressed and trained. And of course, in the last part of this continuum is the sustaining of employment. And we want to educate not just the employer, but the work placement on the needs and the particularities of a stroke survivor returning to work. Graded return to work process should be implemented with a few hours, building up to a few days, building up to maximum hours and duties. Now, regular review with the client and employer for 6 months after client has returned to maximum hours and duties is really best practice, and you want to ensure this way by ensuring any issues arising are addressed early on. Now, occupational therapists they are experts, and me being an occupational therapist, I'd like to focus on this a little bit, are experts at evaluating an individual's ability to perform activities, highly skilled at analyzing work tasks, and they're able to measure the wide range of environmental factors that can affect work performance. They are well qualified to perform these assessments, and the practitioner's holistic approach can enhance work performance through identification of techniques, task modifications, environmental adaptations. There's collaboration with other services, neuropsychiatric services, physical therapists, disability employment advisor if it exists, the client's employer, and of course always be an advocate for the young stroke survivor and educate others on their needs. Now, the CAST, as I see it, is the vocational rehabilitation professionals that we want to address these return to work issues early on in the rehabilitation phase. These services must be flexible so that clients can dip in and out of these services depending on their needs, because this is a chronic issue and not just a short-term acute disability. And of course, obviously, be an advocate for the young stroke survivor. Now, the young stroke survivor specifically needs to be really involved in this process. They need general advice, they need skills assessment, and they need skill development and training and support overall. The employer, well, to educate employer, we want to educate them, but we also want to support them. There really should be some formal structured support to enable disclosure of stroke-related difficulties within a work team, with the intention of supporting the team and the stroke survivor to remain a valued and functional member of the team. Support and flexibility must also be ensured so that by the employer, so that the stroke survivor can really attend medical appointments, allow them to best manage their stroke challenges and specifically their cognitive fatigue. And something as simple as providing a quiet room where the stroke survivor can have complete breaks from work really helps to manage the fatigue. So, this flexibility is really to allow the stroke survivor to, use also different means than expected to achieve an equivalent result. But all these things are possible only through education and, of course, support of the employer. And society, again, I want to stress how we really want to focus on a socio-political change and having more services available to the stroke survivors, vocational services, really change the stigma and the way these stroke survivors are viewed in society. And all of these, really, this cast are really important in order to have a successful return to work process. Now, finally, it's really important to understand that for a successful return to work, all these things considered are important, but finally, the young stroke survivor must be able to participate in the decisions and an active member of the process, to make choices based on their needs. They must be heard, must be understood, and be properly supported in order for a successful return to work to be possible. Thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful.